Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Buffalo Bills Center of the West. My name is Eric Rossborough. I'm Associate Librarian and Senior Cataloger here at the McCracken Research Library. Bob Mack and I and our Director of the McCracken Library, Susan Fretcher, are really gratified at your continued support. It really makes all the work worthwhile, so we're really glad to have you here today. Today's topic, Bob and our special guest, Archivist Robin Cutter from Park County Archives, we'll be talking about 100 years of photos published in the Old Faithful Times. And Bob has written a new book, in addition to all his other books. This book is called The Spirit of Yellowstone Bears, and he will be able to sign that upstairs. You'll be able to get your own copy after, so when it's over, don't trample each other going up to the bookstore. Our next talk will be on Thursday, September 25th. Brian Beauvais of Park County Archives will be talking about Ranches of the South Fork. That will be on Thursday, September 25. You're not going to want to miss that one. And with that, I think we're ready to go. And here you are, Bob Richard.
Thank you for being here. It's good to see so many familiar faces. And I'm going to let Robin do the introduction here. And her family and her husband and his dad, who was also a naval aviator, was a publisher in West Yellowstone. And I'll let Robin talk about that. Robin.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Old Faithful Times. I'm sure some of you probably have never heard of it before, but I will tell you a little bit, if I can see my notes here. In the mid-1970s to early 1980s, Yellowstone National Park had its first and only weekly newspaper, the Old Faithful Times, produced by my father-in-law, Joe Cutter. It was a 64-page weekly paper with stories about Yellowstone and advertising of its gateway communities. Yellowstone visitors could pay 25 cents to purchase an issue, even buying it from a coin-operated vending machine. It was distributed at more than 100 locations in Yellowstone and even in Los Angeles and Chicago. It was dedicated to events, history, and humorous anecdotes from the park. We have probably, my husband and I have probably the largest collection known, but clearly not a complete collection, just a stack about that high of the paper. We're certainly missing a lot of issues. I have loaned my copy to the American Heritage Center, who is digitizing the collection and will make it available from their office there. I hope to plan a trip to Yellowstone, to the archives up there to see what they have. I understand they do have some in their collection, not sure how much of it they have. I've been over to West Yellowstone, to their museum archives, and they only have 6 issues. So they would love to see more. Let's see. I have actually 5 archives that I have talked to around the national park that have requested copies of this that seem very interested in it. So I'm hoping to find either families from West Yellowstone that might have saved copies, or just people that have collected it and maybe have it stored in their attic somewhere that might, after hearing some of this, come forward and say, hey, I have some copies, and be willing to share that. I even attended the Yellowstone Coalition conference and people who are collectors of Yellowstone. And I think when I went through, there was only one person in all of the people that set up to sell there that even had heard of the Old Faithful Times before. So collectors, a lot of collectors don't even know that this exists. My father-in-law, Joe Cutter, was very passionate about the paper and Yellowstone National Park. He was a comedy writer, mostly in Hollywood during his career, Hence, many comical things were written in the newspaper, such as, question of the week asked by a visitor, are bears good to eat? He was known as Yellowstone Joe, Joe Cutter. Oh my goodness, yes, especially if they have stepped in something sweet and you're not neurotic or squeamish about wormy meat. Another one was, oh, where can we see some wildlife? Yellowstone Joe said, you might try the Marmot Bar about 2 a.m. on a Saturday night. However, I suppose you mean other kinds of animals. The best way to see Yellowstone wildlife is to drive slow, look carefully, and take your time. Lots of animals here waiting to take a look at you. There were lots of photos, cartoons, letters to the editor, and even an Old Faithful Times crossword in the issues of the Old Faithful Times. The Old Faithful Times also boasted it had several writers, although my father-in-law inflated his staff. Several issues included a column credited to my husband, just sitting here in front, and even though he never wrote for the newspaper, but his sisters did. Some of the issues included, for instance, were President Jimmy Carter's 1978 visit to Yellowstone with his family. It also included life and death of railroads in Yellowstone and the tragic story of Snaggletooth, a Yellowstone grizzly. Articles were written to be insightful and informative, but his comedic sensibilities permeate each page, and not only through the hapless answers of Yellowstone Joe. One headline proclaims, visitors enjoy uncrowded parks, fishing best in years, gasoline plentiful. President urges people not to travel. We're gonna get ready, Mac and Bob are gonna show some of the pictures. So almost all of the pictures that you're gonna see today were things that were published in the Old Faithful Times. I would say a good percentage of those came from the Yellowstone National Park archives. They may have come, some of them, from some other sources. But Bob will kind of go through and explain a lot of those. And we'll be around afterwards to visit with people or have questions when we're done.
Thank you. Let's get started. We have about 200 slides. We're going to go through them fairly rapidly. We may run over. If you need to leave at 1, please just slip out as easily as you can. But I felt they were important to show today. Mac, let's start. This is just another part of the edition. This I put in. It's called Yellowstone Vernacular, and these are the people that are employees. And I can tell you a story of bringing a date down when I was a ranger, and my mother asked her what she did, and she said, I'm a stripper, Mrs. Richard. And my mother said, what? And I said, Mother, she strips beds. And anyway, these are nicknames that we had for the savages in the park. And those were the employees. Next. Baronet Bridge. The abutments are still there. It's below the present Tower Bridge across the Yellowstone. And if you've been up there this summer, you cannot believe the gigantic bridge they're putting in. Next. Bison in the snow. Next. More bison. Next. Black bears, one of the favorite things to see. And the Park Service decided in the late 50s to eliminate begging bears. We had over 150 begging bears, and when nobody was around, they were shot and taken out and fed to the grizzly bears. Next. This is out at one of the bear dumps.
This is actually a garbage dump.
Well, I call them bear dumps, same thing. All the garbage was dumped in the Hayden Valley, and it's still leaking debris. And the superintendents look at it every time we get a new one, and they haven't done anything about it. And those are seagulls in the background. Next.
You find those at just about any garbage dump in Wyoming. One of the things that they used to do, of course, is they would take the leftovers from the dining rooms in the evenings and take them out to the garbage dump for the bears. And there were bleachers set up for the guests to go out and watch the bears compete for the detritus.
Notice the bear on the tree. Black bear. Next. Next. He did a good job of posing. Next. The black bears were not as dangerous, I guess, but they could injure people. We had very few injuries, but once in a while, somebody would try to feed them by hand and get bit. I had one family that picked their 3-year-old up and put it on the back of the mother bear, and she couldn't understand why I wrote her a ticket. But one of the few tickets I did write. Next. Next. I'm not sure how they got this young cub to get into the photography business, but these and a few of the Ned Frost photos are with the bear and her cubs around the cameras. They're very interested. Next. Another shot. Don't be a litter bug. Before they had the proper garbage cans, they scattered garbage all over, and we had lots of people picking up after them. Next. 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 She certainly is doing quite well on her weight for the winter. Next.
Right there in the camp.
Next. Camping tours. Next. Hayden survey party that came in and surveyed the park. Next.
The gentleman sitting there on the right is Ferdinand Hayden.
Next. Little bit of snow at Canyon. The building is completely covered, and that's just a normal snowfall. Next.
Yeah, that's the general store there at Canyon.
Canyon Hotel, that burned when I was on duty in 1960, and a local person here was tearing it down and removing it, and we had a fire. It saved him a lot of work, and I was asked to check on him, Bill Henry here in Cody, and he was in a bar, so he didn't set the fire. But there was a question. Next. This is a Jack Richard photo, and that's the lower falls and the crust of ice in front of it. Next.
This is the original filling station there at Canyon.
Next. Hiram Chittenden, and he was bridges named for him above the upper falls. Next.
He was the engineer who built all the roads, all the original roads at Yellowstone, and most of the bridges too.
This is a Hiscock photo, the Irma, Cedar Mountain in the background. Next.
This is where you would start your trip to Yellowstone from Cody. This is actually across the street to the east of the Irma Hotel, looking to the north.
Billy Howell is in that and some others. Let's continue. Jane Garlow, and we had a christening of 100 years of the Hayden Arch Bridge 2 weeks ago, and we didn't find that to put it in our book, but there she is. Next. The damn hill. A lot of us screw up with that. Hasn't changed, except now you have to walk it. Next. Corkscrew Bridge. Next. That was built in 1919 and was used through 1927. Still there. Next. Cook City. That hotel is in shambles, but it's still there, the white one. Next. Stagecoaches. Covered wagons.
This would be a tourist headed to Yellowstone.
Deer. Robin, you need to pitch in here.
You're doing a
Next.
good job.
That's another Jack Richard photo that was used by the Old Faithful News. And they were gathering elk and shipping them to the different tribes in Montana. Next. As well as they were shipped back east to the several different states that now have too many elk in their states. There's a bull elk. Next. Very well. I don't know where that is. Anybody?
I think you have to hike quite a way to get to it.
Thank you. Next. This is interesting. Look at how the material has built up around the trees and killed them. That's at Mammoth. Next. That's the old fishing bridge. And of course, I asked the superintendent when he's going to replace, and we get a new fishing bridge. He's replacing all the concrete bridges now. And I said, our current fishing bridge is made of wood, and I think it's time we replace it too. I'd like them to keep it as long as they can, but we need a new transportation bridge. Next. Fishing.
We figure this is in Elk Park, and that's a little tributary probably of the Gibbon River.
Geyser Basin, Excelsior. And the two peaks in the background are called geyser cames. That's where the hot springs cause the glaciers to melt and the dirt piled up and form those hills. Next. Fountain paint pots. Next. Daisy Geyser.
What's interesting about a lot of these pictures is the cavalier attitude that the Park Service had back in those days about people being close to the geysers.
Next.
I rest my case.
They get pretty excited today. Next.
Right.
Next. Next.
You could really crawl down inside if you wanted to.
Next.
Have we figured out where Semi-Centennial Geyser is?
Nope, not me. There's several guides here from Grub Steak Expedition. They should know. Any help? All right, next.
I know where that is.
Next. The governor, Nellie Taylor Ross, was there in 1925. Next.
I have a picture almost identical to that.
Next. 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 Boy, they're right up there underneath it, aren't they?
They are indeed.
Next.
Notice all the people gathered around down there at the base.
Next. I don't know where that is, but I remember hearing Granddad talk about it. They'd drop their handkerchiefs in there and it would bleach them, and then they'd go wash them and clean them up. Next. Golden Gate. They're gonna be closing that in September for construction this fall. Next. That was the first gatekeeper, and he had a cabin up in the Lamar, and we found the basic foundation for his cabin about 10 years ago. Next. This is on Yellowstone Lake. That's
At Sedge Bay.
Sedge Bay,
And up there in the background, that's not Steamboat. Actually, where they're camped right here is just around the corner. If you go a little bit further to the right, the road turns and goes right by Steamboat Point.
next.
Oh, one other thing. Let me go back. If you look here right here in below this tent, it looks like a cart, but it's not. It's the odometer. They pulled that thing and they counted the number of revolutions that the wheels made, and that gave them an accurate listing of how far they had gone in each day.
Next.
Couldn't be too hot.
Next.
Anybody know who June Bright was?
I think it's the person in the center.
Yeah, I think so too, but why is she featured like this? She's got to be some kind of New York socialite.
Thanks, Mac.
Anybody here today from New York? Okay.
This is the lake boat docks, and it looked much like that when I was working up there as a ranger. This was done in the 20s. Lake Lodge. Next. I think that's mine.
I think it is too. So's this one.
Next.
I've always liked this particular view. It's from Lookout Point, and you can see people standing up here on the platform just above the falls, and that gives you a really good idea of just how tall the falls is.
This gentleman had a mountain named after him, and they said that he was not a good guy, so they've just changed the name of the mountain. In fact, lots of changes are coming, not only in Yellowstone, but in the forest. I disagree with it, but who am I? I just a bystander looking in. Next. Coach, look at those chaps. I think would be a little warm on this day, but they look good. Next. Next.
People have to remember that not too long after Yellowstone was created as a national park, there was a great deal of vandalism and people just taking things in the park. And so the president ordered the Army to take over the park. And so Mammoth was Fort Yellowstone. And it was a military reservation for quite a few years. Here's one of those strippers.
No, that's a pack rat. Next. Getting their mail. Next. Next. One of the old white buses. Next. Some of the governors visiting Yellowstone. Next. That's the old hotel before it burned.
And this is a couple of squads of horse-packed Gatling guns. You can see one there on the horse that's towards the center. That horizontal set of tubes is the Gatling gun itself.
What did they use those for?
Custer had some along with him, but he didn't bring them to the battle. Would have been a little bit different if he had.
It's a machine gun, the first machine gun.
Yeah, first machine gun.
Next. That's the Mammoth Jail. It's still there, it's still used. When I took people there, there were 4 cells, and I don't think they've increased it since. Next. That's now the Albright Center, and basically a museum. Next. That stove looks like it would keep things warm. Next. They even had nurses back in the 20s. Next. This is looking down on Mammoth from the terraces.
It says a mountain of petrified water, the Pulpit Terrace and Mammoth Springs Hotel, Yellowstone National Park, 1904.
Gee, they just let them run all over the place, didn't they?
They sure did.
Next. This is an interesting one. Ole Anderson, his great-grandson married my cousin Jody Rhodes, and they have this photograph hanging in their house up in Missoula. And they would put horseshoes in the water and let them build up with the minerals and then sell them. And they had one of the first stores at Mammoth. Next. I don't know where those springs are, but the water was captured there and then put down into the hydroelectric power plant that was used to power the power for Mammoth for a number of years. Then they moved diesel generators in, and then in the 1960s, they brought electric power in from Montana. Next. How's that for a camper? Next. They really like to get on that stuff. And the Rangers get upset today. I don't know why. Next.
This, I think, is one of your dad's pictures.
Probably. Next. Next. Wow, I recognize him. Next. We've been seeing quite a bit of moose activity up going in the northeast entrance and down Soda Butte. There's been a couple of cows and calves, and we see them just almost every time we go up. Next. That is kind of how Morning Glory looks now, but that was the only photograph we had in this collection. Next. Well, I don't know if that's a George Smith from Cody, but they say Madison, Wisconsin, but it definitely is tourists out for a hike. Next. Visitors. Next. Next. And you can see that the Rangers still can drive up there, but that's a communication center for Yellowstone. Next.
And we've got a completely different building up there now, too.
we slipped this in there, mountain pine beetle in the life stages, and has had a detrimental effect on the trees both in Yellowstone and in our Shoshone forest.
And just about every other forest in the Rocky Mountains too.
We had problems with mountain sheep looking for salt going over Dunraven. People were feeding salty chips and that kind of thing, and they didn't know what to do. And I just got a couple of blocks of salt when I was working up there and put them up for the sheep, and they didn't beg anymore. But they said that was wrong, and I just didn't tell them. Next. 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 We see these up the North Fork as well every fall through the winter. Next. I haven't seen that in a long time, but I'm sure they disapprove of that today. Next. Next. Now, look up near the right upper and you'll see the old fort that was built on the hill above the terraces. And that's the only photograph I've ever seen of the original Fort Yellowstone. Next. North entrance being built.
This is out about where the entrance station is today. You can see off there in the distance is the arch, and then the buildings to the right is Gardner.
And that's inside the park.
That's inside the park, yep.
Next. This is when they celebrated the cornerstone, and Theodore Roosevelt was there. Next. Langford was the first superintendent of the park. Never got paid anything, but he came 2 or 3 times in the summer to visit. Next. That Hamilton store is still there. Next. Old Faithful Inn in winter, and that's one of my dad's photographs. Next. That's looking down in the wintertime of the lodge and cabins.
And the big building there right in the center is the gymnasium.
Next. Tug of war.
On the 4th of July.
Next. Old Faithful. Osborne Russell, one of the early
Mountain men.
Yeah.
He was one of the very first explorers, excuse me, into Yellowstone. He wrote in his journals that his very favorite place in all the Rocky Mountains was the Lamar Valley.
I was doing a tour one day and one of my guests said, "Look, there's a fir up in the tree." And I said, "No." And I had to turn around and go back, and here's a porcupine halfway up a lodgepole pine working on the bark. Next. President Warren Harding when he was visiting Yellowstone in 22. Next. That's one of the earliest rangers in the park. Next. And if you look up here and look from the left, the third person you would recognize is one of our former presidents, Gerald Ford. Next.
He was in the park again later as president. Your dad took a whole bunch of pictures that day.
Serious, yes. These are early residents called sheep eaters, and there was small families that wintered in the hot springs areas in the park, and you can find their fire pits and that type thing, and they had natural heating. They would build their wickiups over the ground that was 110, 120 degrees, and they survived the winter and lived off the animals that were snowed into the thermal area. And they couldn't get away from them, and they could kill an animal and eat it and then go on to the next one. Next. This is in Jackson Hole. The Old Faithful News published lots of information and go to Jackson, and we put in a couple of photographs. And I didn't know where the Cody Bowl was, but that's apparently one of the favorite skiing areas. Next. Ski Patrol. Boy, aren't they a rough bunch of characters. Next. There's a snow blower, snow plow. And we've got a few pictures here. Next.
That really is a plow. So is this one, but it's a little bit older. I'm still trying to figure out if that's a steam engine or a diesel.
I wasn't there, Mac. Next.
Well, I know you're old, but you're not that old.
Look at this, they're shoveling snow with shovels. That's amazing to me. Swan Lake Flats. Next.
That's Electric Peak up there in the background.
The Park Service is also responsible for clearing the snow going over the Beartooth all the way to the Montana line. And they've been trying to give it to the Wyoming Highway Department for years. And so far, the Wyoming Highway Department hasn't accepted that responsibility. Next. Yellowstone Lake, looking back towards the Absaroka Mountains and Avalanche Peak. Next. Soda Butte Creek. Thunder Mountain in the background. Winter in Yellowstone is always a treat. Next.
It's a whole nother world in the winter.
Next. Snowshoe rabbit. I have photographed them, and it's always a treat to see them up there. Next. Soda Spring. No idea where that is. Canyon Soldier Station. Next. The soldiers changed uniforms in about 1918 when the Department of Interior took over and they became Rangers. Next.
Yeah, they needed the cavalry down in New Mexico and Texas during the Mexican Revolution to fight the Pancho Villa and others. And so a lot of the soldiers who were stationed in Yellowstone decided to go ahead and retire and join the Interior Department. They were our first rangers up there.
You can still go out on the rifle range and find brass and see where they did their practice. Next. Next.
Don't know what camp that is, but
I don't know either. Horace Albright really involved himself in the communities around Yellowstone and was quite a participant during his time in Yellowstone and Teton. Next. 1915, they allowed cars. 1916, they stopped wagons from being in the park and touring wagons. Next. Isn't that a nice set of teams? 6 of them.
in a dually wagon there.
It looks full, doesn't it?
It sure does.
And it's got a trailing wagon. Next. Next.
That must have been exciting.
Yeah, it looks to me like they kept their feet dry.
Yeah.
There's another coach off to the left in the background.
And that road has been changed. They're now taking a different way up to Mammoth from Gardner. Next. Look at their white dusters. Next. Sylvan Lake, top-notch peak in the background. It's up near Tower. Look at that. I think he forgot and is wearing chaps that should be on a horse. I don't think you need them on a motorcycle. And it's a Harley. Oh, and it's an NPS bike. There's a Traveler. Next. That doesn't look comfortable to me, but at least he's got a spare tire.
Yeah,
Next.
that was absolutely necessary for any vehicle that you drove in Yellowstone in those days.
Next.
New York to Seattle.
Take a close look at this. Mac will point out some features.
Yeah, of course, it's a really nice Vista Dome Mercedes van. We have another photo of this a little bit later in there, and I'll point out one of the more interesting differences of this particular van. Some of you may have noticed it already, but I'm not going to tell you about it until we get to this next picture.
My husband said they used to have that vehicle, the van.
Next. That looks like pretty miserable.
This is an interesting picture. This particular vehicle was provided by Chevrolet as part of a promotion by an organization that was promoting a sort of connected road between all the national parks in the Rocky Mountain region, from Glacier all the way down to Grand Canyon. Tex Holmes, who had the a home lodge up on the North Fork all those many years ago, he was a member of that group, and you can see the road map there on the side door of the driver's side door of the Chevy. Look at the all steel rims, all steel wheels there. The Bingham stage line. I'm trying to figure out if that's actually a White Motor Company vehicle, but it doesn't have the canvas top on it, like the Yellowstone Park buses do. Look at the clearance of that thing.
Well, you needed it in Yellowstone.
Yeah. Well, you did, because the roads weren't all that great in those days, as you'll see here shortly. But that thing doesn't look like it has much in the way of shock absorbers. It must have been a hell of a ride. That's why you need clearance. Okay, here's that van again. Notice the driving wheel. It's neither on the left nor on the right. It's in the middle. Clever people, those Germans.
Little boxy, isn't it?
That almost looks like the unit that Ned Frost built for himself on a Studebaker chassis. Oh, there they are again.
Next. That's the common comment from guests that have kids, and they get about halfway through the park on a tour and they say, "Are we there yet?" Next. Earthquake in '59. It closed the park for several days, closed most of the roads, and 28 people died in a campground over west of West Yellowstone. Next.
I can remember my folks taking us over to Virginia City. We drove through on Labor Day and went right through the middle of the slide area that created Quake Lake, and it had been bulldozed in place, and it was quite an engineering feat to have cleared that area when they did, just a month and a half after the earthquake, or not even that, about a month. This is my photographic hero, William Henry Jackson. He was the photographer, the official photographer with the Hayden expedition, and he took all of his pictures with a wet plate photographic rig, where he'd have to set the camera up in a dark tent and mix his chemistry in the dark tent, coat his glass plates, keeping them dark, putting them into the camera, removing the dark slide, take the picture, putting it all back together and taking the plates back into the dark tent and developing them on site, because you had to do that while the plate was still wet. If it dried out, you couldn't develop it. And so he did that as the first. He took the first tourist pictures in Yellowstone. And here he is a little bit later in his older life. This is probably over in Jackson. But that's the kind of camera that he would have used. That's an 8x10 view camera. They always made a big to-do about the first day that the park was open, and they still do. Each of the entrances. This was Union Pacific's attempt to kind of horn in on the tourist trade by train, which the Northern Pacific Railroad had pretty well had a monopoly on by bringing a spur off of the Northern Pacific from Livingston into Gardner, Montana, and then up to Mammoth Hot Springs. But this was the train station right there in West Yellowstone. It's now a museum. This is Sedge Bay again. And this was taken during the Hayden expedition. The gentleman standing down there on the edge of the lake is probably Thomas Moran, because he provided the subject, the human subject, for a lot of William Henry Jackson's photographs. All the other people were off doing their military duties, and he was the only other person who was kind of free to do that. Some of the William Henry Jackson photographs of Mammoth Hot Springs show a gentleman walking around in the on the terraces, and that was Thomas Moran, the artist. Let's all go fishing.
How about that? I bet there's over 100 trout there.
I thought about counting them, but I decided not to. Notice the really great technological poles that those guys are using. On the one time that I got to go fishing as a small child, we chartered a boat and went way off into the southeast arms, clear down to the Molly Islands. And after we messed with the birds who were on the Molly Islands, we went over all along the lake shore, and the area had the lake had risen and it had inundated the forest, and here were all these trees that had fallen willy-nilly into onto the bottom of the lake, and it looked like giant pickup sticks down there, and you could see the water was so clear you could see the trout swimming down there in between all the trees, and you could throw a bare hook into the water, and the trout would just jump on it. Wham! It was done. So, any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? We did pretty well time-wise. Very good. No questions? Jules can share any experiences, Jules, that you want to share with us? Okay.
Bob, I have a question.
Yes.
Were a lot of those pictures stereoptic pictures?
Some of those pictures, stereoptic pictures.
There were 2 or 3 that I saw that were taken off stereos. Yes. Yes, sir.
I looked at those mounts. Where did they get the mounts, at that time to pull wagons and train and stuff like that?
I think most of them probably came out of Montana, Livingston. But the Park Service also raised a large group of Morgan, and I rode the last Morgan stallion the Park Service owned, and they were gonna send him to the Fox Farm, and he said he'd bucked everybody off for the last 3 years, and when I looked at him, he looked pretty good to me, and I was looking at 70 horses in a round corral, and how do you pick a horse that you wanna ride? And he put his nose over my shoulder and ate out of the grain pan, and I just put the rope over him and let him over, and the old cowboy says, "You can't have him, he's a wild horse, we're getting rid of him." And so we went next door and put him in a round corral and got a saddle and a hackamore, and I rode him around a little bit. I said, "Dad, open the gate, I'm gonna take him out the river and back." And the old cowboy says, "You're gonna get killed." I says, "I know, it's all right." And I rode over and back, and I bonded with that horse, and for 5 years of him every summer, I had a youngster, probably 5 years old, run up and grab him by the hind leg and held him and said, "I love horses." I stepped off, lifted him up, put him in the saddle, and I was much happier, and I think the horse was. If I'd have done that, he'd kick me into the next county. But so the Park Service and the soldiers raised horses in the Lamar Valley. We cut hay up there even when I was a ranger in the Lamar, and put it up loose hay. But changes come with every superintendent, and they leave their mark. And have I answered your question though? Yes,
You were a ranger in 54, right?
yes.
So were you on duty when the earthquake happened in 56?
The earthquake happened in 59, and I was asleep, and I thought it was bears on the roof of our old cabin, and it was shaking. And I got up and went outside with a rifle, and I was gonna kill them. I was tired of having them messing around the cabin. No bears, beautiful moonlight night. And one of the neighbors at another cabin says, "Well, they're having earthquakes down in Chile." I said, "Oh, that's what it is." I went back to bed, went to sleep, and the wife woke me up at 5 o'clock. She says, "There's been all kinds of earthquakes. I've counted 17 or 18 more quakes." She says, "You better go down and let people know what to do." So I went down, no electricity, no communications, and I lit a lantern and hung it outside the door, and some guy wheeled in his sports car and jumped out and came in. He says, "There's been an earthquake." I said, "How do you know that?" He says, "I heard it on the radio." I says, "Well, let's go out and listen." And about that time, another afterquake hit. My desk moved about 6 inches towards him, and he turned around and ran, jumped in his car, and took off. He didn't wait for an answer. But
Yeah, because you said it did claim lives.
it did over by Hebgen Lake. It buried a whole campground.
Oh.
Pretty tragic. Any other questions?
Still buried there now.
Oh, and they're still buried there now. They've never recovered them.
Bob?
Yes.
So where were you located, Bob, when that happened?
I was at Lake, and that was where I worked out of. I trained people at Old Faithful, and every other week the superintendent came down and said, "Bob, I'm gonna go with you." So we scheduled all the different places, but he always rode Big Red. I had to find another horse that I had in the corrals. So I let him ride him, but the horse was good, never bucked him off. He never offered to buck the whole time I had him. It's just the way you handle a horse.
So you felt the aftershocks?
Oh, yes. I slept through them, my wife did. Yes, sir. Paul?
In 1968, when I was in the park, I just have to confess that I did indeed feed a ham sandwich to a black bear. And I've feel so much better now getting it off.
Write him a ticket.
Paul, I have to tell you that when I married a young lady from Virginia that was in the park on vacation, and I stopped she and her girlfriend for feeding the bears, and they denied it. Of course, there were bear tracks all over the car. And I gave them a choice of going to Mammoth to court or having dinner with me and another single ranger in Jackson. And she looked at me and says, well, I'm not stupid, we're going to dinner. So, but the worst problem was for the next 3 years, she would, when I went to work, she would get in the pickup and go with a bag of oranges or grapefruit and feed the bears. She says, that's the neatest thing, just throw it out there and the bear sit back and peel it. And all the juices would run down his cheeks. And she said, my boss caught her one day and gave her a bad time. And she says, well, when your wife quits picking flowers and putting them on the table when we come over, I'll quit feeding the bears. So you're not the only one. It's just part of Yellowstone, and I call it my backyard. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
They tell you not to go off the boardwalk now. Didn't some of those people break through the crust and get burned?
The people who walk through the boardwalks, off the boardwalks, break through the crust and get burned.
Very seldom, but the crowds have increased tenfold. So there's more people, more weight. But I think people were pretty careful back in those days. The photograph said that they didn't get burned, but I don't know. We'd have to research the records.
Yeah, Yellowstone is having a record year of visitation so far this year. We're up about 4% over 2022, 2021, which was the record year of visitation in Yellowstone.
Thank you very much. And Jules is here, and Robin, Mac, and I, if there's further questions. Have a great weekend, and thank you for being here.
And don't forget, you can get a signed book by Bob upstairs. His new book, Spirit of Yellowstone Bears, is available for sale upstairs. We'll see you up there. Thanks very much.